And if we are live on Facebook, welcome everybody. I'm Lauren from Are You on Stage? And do you guys want to introduce yourselves while we're going to give it yep, we are live. So yeah, now you guys can introduce yourselves.
You first.
Hello, I'm Tim Locklear. I'm the Managing Artistic Director for North Raleigh Arts and Creative Theater.
And I'm Jesse Gephart, and I act and direct around these parts, and Lauren has somehow entrusted me to interview other people.
Good. It's all good. I'm enjoying watching the interviews. So I'm going to pop off and let you guys chat, and I will come back at the end.
Great. Hi, Tim.
Hello, Jesse.
How are you?
I am good today.
Good.
For all of this, I'm doing pretty good. It's been tough because I'm so social, and I miss people.
I did not know that about you.
And I miss people so much, but
yeah,
we're doing the best thing for us all to stay safe and get better. So
yeah. Well, I'm glad that you are mustering through. I feel like I play the part of an extrovert. But as I get older, I feel like I'm more of an introvert. So I'm actually not terribly mad about this whole thing.
I know Jim is very much the introvert, and it doesn't bother him. So
yeah. So why don't we start with just a little kind of full disclosure moment, and let's talk about like how we know each other, because honestly I don't know if I could tell you how we met. I just know like all of a sudden you were in my sphere, as it were.
I can tell you the first time I saw you.
I think I know this part.
The part you were in A Beautiful Thing with Raleigh Ensemble Players, and I was a customer service manager at Target, and you were in the men's department after I saw it, and I went up to you and talked to you, and I think you thought I was trying to hit on you when I wasn't. I remember that distinctly, and I remember seeing you and Ryan Brock in that show, and I just thought, wow, what outstanding acting in this area, because it wasn't very long after, I can't remember what year it was, but Jim and we had started going to see theater here in the area, and we both loved that movie and the play.
Yeah,
I just thought it was gorgeous. It was actually an art space. It was when Raleigh Ensemble was in an art space.
It was 2006, and it was my second show with them, and that one was really, really special for sure.
So I saw you a lot from being on stage in the beginning, and with Raleigh Little Theater and different things like that. And then, as things evolved, I think that's when we sort of, became friends and through the theater. And
then we started working together more, especially once you started running Interact over there. And and then we've also worked together as I directed for you last year. And this is back when Jess was running it, though. I rented out the space to do the Pride there.
To do the Pride.
Yeah. So yeah, just full disclosure, we know each other. We go back. I don't want anyone to think that I'm, we're strangers or anything. So I would like to start with one of the things that I'm kind of excited about for this is that I feel like you and I have talked about a lot of stuff, but there's a lot about you that I don't know. So I'm excited to kind of learn some new things, and I hope that everyone else is. Why don't you just start off by talking a little bit about where you were born, and like where do you consider like your formative years being spent?
Oh, wow. Okay. I was born in Laurinburg, North Carolina, and my parents lived in Laurinburg, and then we moved to a town called Clio, South Carolina, which isn't far from Laurinburg. And
is Laurinburg in the east or the west?
It's 2 hours. It's an hour south of Fayetteville. So
okay. Oh, okay. Got it.
The funny thing is my mother's house sits in South Carolina, but the road in front of our house is in North Carolina.
I've heard about towns like this on when all of the gerrymandering, redistricting stuff was being talked about. They were talking a lot about places like that.
And people always find that to be amusing because, it's so unique. What did you do? it was so natural for us, we didn't,
Right.
you get to a point you don't think about it. The funny thing is back in the days of Southern Bell, which I don't know if you're old enough to remember what Southern Bell is. It was the telephone company.
Oh,
When you had
yeah.
long distance, if there was a house across the road from my mother's, it would have been long distance to pick up and call them.
That is funny.
So that's kind of unique. And then my parents divorced when I was 5, and my mother remarried, and we moved to Wallace, South Carolina, which is about 35 minutes from McCall, South Carolina, in Laurinburg. I went to school from the 6th grade to the 12th grade in McCall, South Carolina, because my mother's address is in McCall. And I have a brother and sister.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the oldest, and then my brother and my sister. My brother's 6 years younger than I am. And my sister, there's 23 months between my brother and sister.
Okay.
So that's where I was raised. I'm just a simple country boy on a farm.
Yeah, I was going to say, so you come by the dialect honest then.
Very honest.
Yeah.
I'm very self-conscious of it. A lot of people don't know that. I'm always who I am. I think people, when they have this dialect and this accent, people mistaken it and think that we're hicks and stupid and don't have good sense. But I mean, I was an honor graduate in high school, and I think people would say I was very smart, and that's where I came from. I have worked in the tobacco fields many a day.
So you said your mom divorced when you were 5. Did
Yeah.
you maintain a relationship with your father when he left?
Interesting story.
That's why we're here.
My mother and father divorced, and my mother remarried. My brother and sister's father, people say we're half brother and sister. I've never looked at it like that. They're my brother and sister. We're all very close. My father was around up until he would come and visit me. He would come and get me on the weekends and things like that. And then my mother got her second divorce when I was in the 6th grade. So I was around 12 years old. And we moved back to the area where she is now, because I consider that home. Mm-hmm. And because my father didn't want to pay child support, he disappeared out of my life for 6 years. He came back 2 weeks before I was to graduate high school and thought he was going to my graduation. That didn't work. So we had I guess you could say, a tumultuous relationship as father and son. But it wasn't because I was a gay man and that's what people automatically think. It wasn't. It was because of that instance in my life. When he came back, we tried to have a relationship, and it was not a father-son relationship. However, it was, in the end, we were cordial. I would do anything I could possibly do for him because that's how my mom raised me. Mm-hmm. And I'm jumping ahead, but he passed away when he was 58 years old. He had glioblastoma, which is brain cancer. And I was my father's only child. And when he was diagnosed, along with my aunts and uncles, his brothers and sisters and stuff, I ended up taking care of him. Mm-hmm. And I was there holding his hand when he passed away. Wow. So, I don't lose sleep over it. We did, I don't want to say reconcile, but we had a cordial relationship. Mm-hmm. So
when it happened, you were 5, so it's hard to kind of think back, but do you remember moments of like not understanding what was going on, or feeling like confused, or like, does your mom try to like really explain to you what was going on?
I think I was too young at that time. Mm-hmm. I knew that they were separating and divorced and things like that. And I never really held a grudge about the divorce. That was never in my mind until later, right. I thought, but it was never an issue per se back when I was that young. Of course, when you become a teenager, you start questioning a lot of things.
Right.
Right. But my mother and I have always been very close, and we still are to this day.
Yeah.
Along with my brother and sister, you know, we go through those tumultuous years growing up. Because of the age difference, I don't think my brother and I were really close in the younger years. However, when I became a teenager, and he was a football player, he is very much the all-American guy.
Mhm.
And my sister was my baby.
Yeah, I can see that.
I used to sit my sister on we had an ottoman, a round ottoman, and I would love music my whole life, and I would put on music and I would make her dance with me. She would stand around the ottoman and we would dance around the ottoman together.
Wow.
So those are the good memories that I remember
Yeah.
about growing up. So
I find it interesting that you mentioned that you were your father's only child, and I'm an only child. And, not every only child gets the opportunity to have siblings at some point. And so that's interesting that that dynamic of how for your father, you were the only one, but you had these other siblings. And that's because only children are a special breed of people. And I think it's really great that you were able to experience siblings like
and
that.
I have never thought of myself as an only child.
Yeah, well,
I find, so.
So you mentioned this, so I'll circle back to it. Being a gay man. So what was that like? Like when did you come out? When?
Oh, wow.
Here we go.
Here we go. Okay. When I was in high school, I knew I was different, but I knew I was attracted to girls. I had girlfriends. I also had an attraction to guys, but I didn't understand it. And coming up in a Southern Baptist church, I definitely knew it was wrong. So I guess, the years in high school, they were questioning and I didn't understand. People use the word bullying today. I was just treated differently. Up until I would say the 10th grade, from the 6th grade to the 10th grade were really hard years for me. And then I got some really good friends in high school, and I came into my own, I think, in high school. But it wasn't until I went in the Air Force that I actually had a date with a man for the first time. And I had other girlfriends after that, and then when I had to get out of service because of my heart issue, I came back home and was still dating a girl, and it just evolved. And it wasn't until 92 that I was struggling with my religion, being a Baptist, and church meant a lot to me, and struggling with who I really was. And I had a nervous breakdown and was admitted myself in the hospital on January 5th of 92, and I got out May 28th of 92.
Wow.
And I don't mind talking about it because it made me the kind of person I am today. When I got out, I went through 4 years with one of the best therapists that ever walked. His name was Jim Williams. He helped me for 4 years of my life, and it took.
How old were you in 92?
Oh, wow. I'm not that great at math, I guess. Come on. I was born in
ballpark.
I was born in 65. So
okay, so you're in mid-late 20s then.
I was mid-20s.
Okay.
That's when I officially came out, to my family. And I remember after I came out of the hospital, I was home for about 2 weeks, and I told my mom, I said, my mom and sister were at home. I've never forgotten it. And I said, here's what's going on. I'm gay. And my mom looked at me and she said, tell me something I didn't know. And I got really, really angry.
Yeah.
I did not speak to my mom for over 3 weeks. Huh. But hindsight's 20/20. And, when we sat down and had a conversation, she said, it wasn't up to me to come to you. I was waiting on you to talk to me. And, but I had been through all this turmoil about myself and what I believed in religion, and them telling me I was, gonna go to hell for being who I was innately, that it really weighed itself on me. And then, of course, then there's the issues of being a child whose father left and you didn't know if he cared about you or not, and that relationship, all of that culminated to, me having that breakdown.
Yeah. Do you think that it was, I mean, so you were angry at your mom, which I can understand. Do you think it was because all this time, like, you could have just gone to her in the first place?
And like I said, I think, and not jumping ahead or anything, but I think the gay youth of today doesn't realize the impact that, in the 80s and 90s with AIDS and everything else that was going on, because that was another layer to, trying to come to terms with who I was, that was a big part of it. And yeah, I thought at the time when I got angry with my mom, if you would have just come to me, I wouldn't have had to go through all of this. And that's not true. And I know that, So.
I mean, it could have been, I mean, there is something really like affronting about your mother coming to you and trying to do what she thinks is best and open this door for you. And then for you, I mean, it could have been worse, actually, potentially.
You're right. And the one thing I can say, and this goes out to my extended family, to my brother, my sister, my mom, cousins, aunts, uncles, I have never one time had any problems about me being gay, even my grandparents. So I'm one of the lucky ones, and I know that. Even though they were born and raised in a Baptist church, their love for me overshadowed anything else that could possibly be.
I think the lucky ones that are raised in a situation like yours are when the lucky ones are those when they're surrounded by people that are able to objectively stand back and say, well, he's right here in front of me, and he's the same that he was yesterday. He's the same person that I loved before. And, just because this institution is saying all this bad stuff, but then they don't know you, like, you're great, you're amazing. And so it's good that there are people to help.
And I always had a great support system as far as my growing up. See, the area that I grew up in, all of my extended family lived within, I would say, a 3-mile radius. My mom's brothers and sisters, my dad's brothers and sisters, with the exception of an uncle who was in the Army, who I think is on tonight. I can't see who's on, so I know my brother and sister are supposed to be on, so they're hearing all of this. But I always had a great support system, even from great aunts and uncles who were in my life. I was very lucky that all of my grandparents lived till I was 33 years old.
Wow.
It's a blessing and a curse because they really made me aware of the person I am today. My mother's parents and my father's parents were great grandparents, and they helped shape me into the man that I am. And I always want to honor them in their memory. I know everybody in the theater community has heard me quoting my grandparents at some point in time. But when you come up in an environment like that, I think it's very important to have that support system.
Yeah, I agree. I'm glad that you had it. I mean, I wish everyone had it.
I had great teachers too. There was some outstanding teachers in my life, especially in high school.
That's good. You mentioned this, and so I would just like to share this photo.
You did go digging.
I did go digging.
That was taken in basic training at Lackland Air Force Base in Texas. God, what a goofball.
How old do you think you were right here?
I was 19.
19?
Because I went in service, delayed entry. I graduated in 84 and I went into service February of 85 because I was not going to Texas in the middle of summer. I wasn't that crazy. So I went in wintertime, and it was still hot. It was hot in
Yeah.
San Antonio in February. So I remember that when that picture was taken. So
what made you want to enlist?
my family could not afford for me to go to college, and I wanted to go to college more than anything. And I knew that the Air Force could help me do that. I had a very high ASCAP score because when we were in high school, you could take the ASCAP. I said ASCAP, that's not right. ASVAB test. And I qualified very high, and the Air Force courted me to join. And if I was going to join the military, I was not going in anything but the Air Force.
Was there a history of serving in your family? You mentioned an uncle, I think.
I had two uncles, one on my father's side and one on my mother's side. The one on my father's side, my Uncle Mitchell, he was active duty and went to Germany and was in for, I think, 20-something years. And he was all over. He started out at Fort Bragg. And then my mother's brother was in the National Guard, and both of them were in the Army. So,
what was it about the Air Force that you wanted to do?
I think it was because of wanting to I want to say this the right way, wanting to see the world. And I thought the Air Force would definitely show me more of the world than going into the Army could. And I was not getting on a boat. I wasn't going in the Navy because that's too much water I had to drink because I can't swim. To this day, I can't swim. And the Marines, I just did not want to go into the Marines. So
that's
it was
a special breed of person.
I agree.
So you didn't want to like Top Gun it? You weren't like trying to, that wasn't your reasoning? You didn't want to like sandy volleyball and all that?
No.
So how long were you in the Air Force?
I was in the Air Force for 3.5 years, and I would have been in longer. I probably would have re-enlisted had I not developed a heart situation.
And what was that exactly?
Well, at first they thought I had multiple sclerosis. They couldn't figure it out because I was having so many different issues. And they discovered the heart issue while I was in service. And that, that there's some rules that you just can't break.
Yeah.
And so I was medically discharged from the Air Force. I was at Travis Air Force Base out in California my entire career, which everybody has probably heard of now because that's where they were quarantined.
Oh, quarantined.
I can't say thank you. People when they first came back on airplanes was at Travis.
Huh. Were you disappointed that you couldn't re-enlist? I mean, obviously.
I think the disappointment was more for, and this may sound wrong, that I had to go back home because I had always, my whole life growing up, I always wanted to see the world. My escape was books and movies and music. I loved it. Not that I didn't appreciate growing up on a farm. I don't want to give that impression, but I always knew that there had to be more to the world. And those books opened up a whole new world. And my love for literature and, there was really no classes in school I didn't like except chemistry and physics. But other than that, I loved school.
So you said you wanted to enlist because you wanted to go to college. So did you go to college?
I took some classes while I was in the Air Force. That's how you have to do when you're there. But when I came, to make a very long story short, I ended up going to Fayetteville Tech right after me and Jim met, because when I came home, I had to go to work. Just because I was medically retired, I didn't get disability or anything like that. Because I wasn't disabled to work, I just couldn't do the work that was in the Air Force. They wouldn't allow me to. So I went to work and started working, and life happened.
Yeah. Did you get to travel while you were enlisted?
Just some TDYs. locally. I did, you know, to different Air Force bases in the United States, but not overseas, no.
Okay. So you mentioned that you went on your first date with a man when you were in the Air Force. What was that like? Not necessarily like what did you do or like,
No,
but I mean,
I got you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was, at the time it was scary. He was a fellow soldier, and he was a fellow airman, I should say, to use the correct terminology. And we were an hour and a half outside of San Francisco and 3 hours from Lake Tahoe. And it actually started out as a friendship, and I didn't know he was gay, and I don't know if he knew I was. I mean, and then the attraction happened gradually, and then it got scary because you weren't supposed to be homosexual in the Air Force. So that, you know, in that respect, it was a scary, but it was also a relief to know that, hey, I'm not alone. So,
yeah.
Or at least I wasn't these typical things that we would see on TV. And I used one time Paul Lynn as an example. Right. You know, not that there wasn't anything with Paul Lynn, but you know, I think you get where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
I wasn't Paul Lynn, that
right.
kind
of. So what do you think, what would be some lasting effects like that your service had, like, what do you think you took away from that you've carried with you for the rest of your time here?
Immediately it comes to mind, and it makes me so angry these days and time. I'm as much a patriot as anybody else. You know, I would not have gone into the Air Force if I didn't love my country. And some of the stuff I stand for today looks at it as being unpatriotic. And I think there is a love when you go into service. I think you definitely have to have a love for standing for your country and doing anything you can, because this is, no matter what we may think now, this is the best country in the world, because I've been places and I've seen things, and I know the United States is the best country in the world, and I would do anything I can for it. But it instills you a love and a camaraderie for being a patriot. And I also credit not only the Air Force, but the work ethic that I have from my grandparents especially, and the Air Force just instilled that work ethic I have about everything I do. You know, so those are two things that immediately come to mind.
Great. So I'm going to shift gears a skosh here.
Okay.
And I would like to know about your first introduction to theater. Like, was it a show? Was it a script you found on a shelf? Like, what was the thing that kind of the spark?
Hey, you asked for the first one.
Yeah. Doesn't have to be the best one.
8th grade, we had a semester of being able to take drama club. And Miss Rebecca Probst, who was one of those influential teachers, and had a script. It was, I cannot remember what the name of it was, but I was a businessman and my secretary was quitting, and I was trying to search for secretaries, and I was the only guy in it, and there was 8 girls who come through, and all of them, it was like Miss Prius was one. And so all these girls had these distinct characteristics coming through, and I just fell in love with being on stage in front of people. And that was not, I'm wrong, that was not my first time. I was in the 5th grade, and I had to lead in a play called The Christmas Elf. And I was the elf in that show. So that started it. And then when I was in high school, and I know we will come back to talk about Miss Doris Johnson, who actually was my high school English teacher for all 4 years. She fed my love for the arts, for literature, for theater, for the written theater. I didn't get to go to theater then, but I guess she saw something in me, and she saw my love of writing because I love to write. But she gave me books. She gave me stories to read outside of class, because I would go to her and say, "Can you tell me something else that would be good to read?" And so she fed that love of being able to read. There was another teacher who was very influential in high school. Her name was Brenda Teal, and I'm not sure if she's on now or not, but she was supposed to be. She helped me a lot with the bullying situation in school, and I had some really good friends in high school. Some people called them Tim's Angels. There was my good friend Diane Grant now, Antoine Irby and Judy Alford. They were my core friends, and they helped me tremendously. And that's how I got through, was through literature and finding the theater and being given all of this stuff by teachers who were supporting me in my love for the arts.
What was it about theater, the act? What was it that drew you in, that excited you?
Immediately, I think it's being somebody else. I could escape. I could see that there was more to the whole world than just what was going on in my little corner of the world, that there was so much more out there. And being able to see these different characters and the lives that they led, that was a big part of it, is the being able to escape.
Did you know, or did you feel like it was going to be a part of your life forever?
No.
Or was it something that you were just kind of enjoying in the moment?
I knew that books and writing would always be a part of my life. And I appreciated theater. I would go see local community theater productions when I could. That was, during high school and stuff. It wasn't until I got out of service and came back home that a very good friend of mine said that you need to go to the Marlboro Players in Bennettsville, South Carolina. They're getting ready to do Arsenic and Old Lace, and they don't have enough men, and you love theater, and you were on stage one time. Why don't you just go and audition? And making that decision was probably one of the best decisions I ever made, because that's where I met my mentor for theater. The mentor who gave me all the tools that I use today was Joanne Bastian. She was directing the show, and she cast me as Dr. Einstein. And I learned to fall into a window seat. And it was just, that was one of the most fun times I've ever had on stage. And she says she saw that spark in me. And she had her master's. She graduated from Columbia in theater. She had worked in TV. She had worked on Broadway. And she and her husband had come to the area from Oregon. There was a paper mill being built in Bennettsville, South Carolina, and it was from Willamette Industries. And her husband was the big vice president, and so she came and helped with Marlboro Players, which was already established because she loved theater. And that was her first production with the Marlboro Players, and it was my first production with the Marlboro Players. And I worked with Joanne for 4 years, doing shows, helping her assistant director. And she is the one who gave me my first opportunity to direct. And she told me when she got ready to go back to Oregon, she said, "Tim, if I could write you a bachelor's degree in theater, I would, because I've taught you everything I can possibly teach you."
Yeah.
But
what was the show you directed?
My first show I ever directed was Still Magnolias. They wanted her to direct it, but she had gotten a script and give it to me, and we had talked about it. And she was not from the South. She was from New York. Originally, she was from New York. And she said, the only person who can direct this show right now in good fashion and bring what you need to be brought to the show is Tim. And she and her husband had a vacation plan to Belize, and she wasn't giving that up. So I ended up getting to direct my first show. And that's where I was really, really bitten about directing.
Yeah.
There was something, and you know this, it's like giving birth. I mean, I think that's what I compare it to. They're my children that, you know, we have actually brought to fruition and put up on stage. So,
yeah. When did you move to this area?
Jim and I met in '96, and he was living in Fayetteville. And we dated for 19 months. I got laid off from a job and said, I'm moving in. I moved in with him in Fayetteville. And we lived in Fayetteville for 5 years. And then Jim is originally from Raleigh. And we moved up here in '02, November of '02, and moved in the house in '03. So I've been up here in the area since '03. There we are.
There you are.
Here we are.
There you are. Where was your wedding?
In Central Park in New York City.
Wow.
We just celebrate, we only celebrate one anniversary, and that's April 9th. And that's the day we met. That's the one I consider. But our wedding anniversary is the 24th of April. It's coming up.
Oh, that is coming up.
And we were married in 2016 in New York when DOMA was overturned. Because it would help us with taxes. And Jim said when it was going to get recognized federally, you know, that's when we would end up getting married. And we did. And we wanted to choose somewhere that was special for us because we couldn't get married here. And Jim is very, very glad that we got married when we did, because October the 10th of that year is when it became legal everywhere and was legal here in North Carolina. And I was that person who was going to have a huge wedding if I could, but I would not trade what we had for anything in the world.
Yeah.
I wish more of my family could have been there, and friends, but you know, we really, really treasure our wedding and what we had.
So how did you, so you started, when you got here and got settled and started doing theater here, was RLT, Raleigh Little Theater, one of the first spots that you were?
Raleigh Little Theater was the first spot. I had emailed Haskell about getting back involved in theater and had sent him my history and things like that. And Sean Smith, there's Haskell. I miss Haskell.
Me too.
That picture was taken. I was given the Ed Bodell Award as the newcomer that year, and he had presented it with me at the Canty Awards that year, and that's what that picture's from.
Find you somebody that looks at you the way Haskell does, right?
Mm-hmm. There you go. But Haskell put me in touch. They were doing Veronica's Room. And Sean Smith was the director, and Haskell said that he was looking for an assistant director. And I got in touch. He gave me Sean's email, and I emailed Sean, and we met, had lunch, and ended up, Sean lived less than 2 miles down the road from us. And he gave me my first opportunity, and Sean said he went to Haskell and told him, said, Tim is the real deal. You use him anyway. He knows what he's doing. So I credit Sean and Haskell for getting me back involved in theater here in this area.
Great. So then how do you give the Cliff's Notes version? Because I figure it's kind of a journey to where you are now, kind of leading North Raleigh Arts and Creative Theater. How did we go from there to here?
I had worked at Raleigh Little Theater for, a long time and was getting involved in the theater scene, and was approached by James Ilsley and Jess Barber to come and be interviewed for the managing director position at North Raleigh Arts and Creative Theater. I interviewed and was hired for the job. And that's how I became the managing director at NRACT. And then when Jess Barber decided to leave the artistic director slot, they combined the position. So I really do two jobs as managing director and artistic director, which most theater has both, you know, a lot of theaters have both. But that's how it came to be, is I was hired at a time when they were between managing directors, and the board interviewed me and I was hired.
So when was that? When did you take over as the managing artistic director?
I'm getting old, Jesse. I have been there. I am working on my 6th year.
Okay.
That I can tell you. I'm in my 6th year with NRACT, and I understand from Romney Rossi that I am the longest managing director that they have had there.
Oh, wow. So what do you think, like, I mean, apart from the right now, obviously, when like everything is a challenge, like what are some challenges of leading a company like NRACT?
Oh, wow. I think that when I first went to NRACT, people had the wrong idea of what NRACT was, and what, you know, what it was trying to be turned into when I first went there. And what I mean is they had reached a point that it was time to make more of a good situation that they already had in place. They were doing good productions, and people were talking about the productions, and they were adding to the production value each time. And being in a commercial space, as you know, and not being in a city-owned building is an obstacle in itself because of what the rent is there. Commercial space is not cheap. And then as time went on, one of the first things that James Isley, when he was board president, did is take out the drop ceiling and open it where it looks more like a traditional theater, traditional black box theater. And, you know, over time, all the improvements that have been made and the production value it's all a process. And the biggest obstacle, honestly, is money. And that's it. I think that's everything. I think that's every theater, not just NRACT.
Right.
But, and then I think a lot of people didn't even know that the theater was in existence for a long time, because they did children's productions. And, you know, we still try to do at least 2 family shows a year along with the cast camp, and have children involved in doing classes and camps. But and it has not been me alone. It has been a true village. They say it takes a village, and it does. You know, people like you who come in and direct great shows, and getting other artists to come in and help us get that visibility that is so desperately needed when you're doing the arts, and bringing new blood in, and not getting, as we both know, some theaters have that cliquish mentality. And that's the one thing I will always fight against at NRACT, because when you're a community theater, and that's what we are, as a community theater, we're not that we don't want to do quality material, but you have to support the community as a whole, and not just a certain percentage. So
your involvement aside, meaning like in general, all the shows that have been produced since you have come to know about the theater and work there and run it, like what are some of the shows that you are most proud of? You feel like they just like really succeeded in that space?
At NRACT, when I first got there, Rent, of course, David Henderson directed Rent. It actually was held over and was one of the best things that the theater has ever presented there. I feel like when I first got there, Carrie, the musical, when they first took the ceiling out, James did an outstanding job with Carrie, which, you know, if you know the history of Carrie the musical, it was not the biggest, it's one of the biggest flops in Broadway history.
Yeah, it's bumpy, that one, that history. It's
but
bumpy.
It was, you know, when they reworked it and stuff, it was very beautiful in that space. And I think that's one reason it didn't succeed on Broadway. It was a really good, you know, good show. I'm partial, and it's not because you're on screen, but the pride, somebody looked at the picture the other day, a couple of months ago, and said, "Why are you posing with somebody in a Nazi uniform?" And I had to explain that it was from a play.
Yeah.
So, Putnam County at Raleigh Theater. Putnam, and you did it, Raleigh Theater.
Everyone has done Putnam County.
The spelling bee, what Yvonne and them did in that space with the bleachers, mic set design, it was amazing in that space, and it was
very fun.
It was a very, very fun show. And then you have shows like you did this year, Be More Chill, which was so much better than I would have ever done. And, it was an outstanding production. And there's been some really good shows there. And one thing I will say is the cast camps that go on every year that Pete Comfortor has been doing for over 10 years, to cast those kids in April, and then they get their scripts and are ready to go that last week in July, and they have 2 weeks to put up a show. Those shows are phenomenal to be put up in 2 weeks with a group of teenagers. So those are the things I'm proud of.
What is something that you think Interact does well, like in general, something that the theater does well?
I think we are very good at putting on shows in small spaces, making it a more intimate space, and sometimes that's a hindrance. To bring up Spring Awakening, I was terrified because of the nudity, and how am I going to position it when you have that close proximity to the audience? And so that's why I put the nude scene at the back of the stage instead of down front. But I think that's one thing that people are very surprised at some of the musicals, especially that we try to tackle and bring them on a smaller scale there to the stage. I think that's one of the best things that we do.
I would agree.
And I miss Raleigh Ensemble players tremendously, and there is not really, let's take some of the stuff that Patrick's doing at Raleigh Little Theater. It pushes the envelope some, but that edgy thing, I try my best to push the envelope a little bit, and add some of those edgy shows to our season. And we try to do a variety. And that's one thing that Raleigh Ensemble players taught me when I was going to see shows there and seeing the work that Glenn was doing, is you can do those edgy shows and you still have that audience. There's an audience for those shows.
Yeah, so David Henderson and I spoke a bit about REP last time we did this. They are definitely a missed voice around here. So we have a question from the crowd wondering if Interact is getting a break on your rent during all this COVID. You don't have to go into the details if you can't.
I'm not. The one thing I will say is there's an email out and I'm waiting to hear back.
Yeah.
That's what I can say about that.
Well, I hope you do.
But as of right now, no. So.
Wow. Support your local theaters. They need your money right now in a serious way. Okay, so we have about 10-ish minutes left. You mentioned something earlier. It's funny because I have a list here of called Things You Love, and I was gonna talk about them, and it's funny, you've already kind of talked about them, which was traveling, writing, and Broadway. And last time I did this with David, I did explain that Graham situation that I stole from Hot Ones, which if you don't watch Hot Ones, everyone should watch Hot Ones on YouTube. So I would like to just real quick kind of show a few places that you've been.
Okay.
And just to get the some reaction about it and what it was like. And
wow, that was in Hong Kong in 2007, I think it was. Yeah, 2007. It was very, very interesting. the culture there to get to go into a country like that and experience. They have Taoist temples there, and I'd never been exposed to the Taoist religion and stuff, and just the culture and how they honor the elderly there was just so tremendous, and it was so, that was a great trip.
And you've done most of this traveling in your adult life, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I did not go out of the country until 2000, and that was to London for the first time. Oh, wow.
This is Maui.
That is Maui, on the road to Hana. We went to Hawaii and was staying in Oahu, and the one thing I wanted to do while we were there is to take the road to Hana. So we took a day flight over to Maui and drove the road to Hana. And if you ever go to Hawaii, you must go to Maui and do the road to Hana, because that is truly what you see Hawaii, what Hawaii in the imagination of those who have never gone. That's what Hawaii is like. And you actually take this whole road, and when you come to the end of it, it's like you're on the moon, because it's a volcano. It's an amazing trip. It was an amazing trip.
Okay, here's another one.
That is when
So
we went to Russia, our cruise. When we went to Russia, we went on a cruise and went to Denmark, Sweden, and went to St. Petersburg, Russia. I have no desire to go back to Russia. We were in port for 2 days, and we had a 2-day tour. And I think the reason I don't want to go back to Russia is the tour guide scared us to death. It was very, we saw some very interesting things while we were there, but Jim said it's in my imagination, but I was very uneasy while I was in Russia. But it was interesting. I can say I've gone there and I've seen parts of St. Petersburg and some very interesting, historical things.
I like that.
They have great vodka. That I will say. They serve vodka with lunch, dinner, everything. You get vodka, and it's the smoothest vodka I've ever had in my life.
I believe it. I liked that picture because it was a throne, and I felt like, it's like your throne. Switzerland.
Words just cannot express that trip. It was truly a dream of a lifetime, to get to go and actually hike places I didn't think I would be able to before my bariatric surgery. I had such a life-changing experience in Switzerland while I was there. Me and Jim took a walk, and when we were on that walk, I have never ever been so at peace with myself and with who I was and who I am and who I had become in my life. And I begged him, I said, if you outlive me, you take my ashes back here and you spread them on this walk. Words cannot begin to express. I love that country. I don't know if I live there in another life or what, but
I like down here, there's these balanced rocks. I just noticed that. I was looking, that's awesome. What's one place that you haven't been that you would like to go to?
I want to go to South Africa. I want to go to South Africa. I've never been to Scotland. I would love to go. I would love to go on a safari and go to Zimbabwe and see the Victoria Falls. There's a lot of places, the world is round. I always said I dreamed when I was sitting under those trees on the farm and reading those books that the world is round, and I wanted to know it was. And so I had that desire to travel and have been fortunate that I've seen a lot of the world. What's
a place, you mentioned Russia, you wouldn't want to go back. Is that kind of like your top country that you don't want to return to?
I don't want to go back to Russia. Okay, this might offend some Americans. I really have no desire to ever go back to Nashville, as much as I love country music. I always say places have a feeling. There's something about places, they make you feel a certain way. And I felt very uneasy, and I felt really dirty in Nashville. And I don't mean to offend anybody who loves Nashville. That was just my feelings and my experience in that when I was in Nashville. I just did not like it.
Yeah. So then looking into the Broadway world, it's funny that you're flanked by the Aida poster, because that was my first Broadway show. Was
Aida. It?
Yep.
Oh wow.
Not Heather Headley though. I saw. I forget who I saw. She didn't take it up at the end of Dance the Robe. That's all I knew at the time. Adam Pascal was still in it though. Yes. What was your first Broadway show?
The one that is on this side of me, we saw Phantom when we went to San Francisco for the first time. I had never been to a big Broadway show before.
Yeah.
And I guess a lot of people say Phantom is their first experience.
There's a lot of Phantoms out there.
And then the second one was Les Mis that we saw at Myrtle Beach at the Palace Theater when they used to bring those tours through at Myrtle Beach. Me and Jim went to see Les Mis down there. And that is my all-time favorite musical, is Les Mis. I know people don't think it is, but it is. Les Mis is there's a huge picture right here in our room.
It is an impressive. I mean, on the camera, they don't do it justice. If you can go,
you've seen it.
Yeah,
it's huge.
What's the first show that you saw in a Broadway house, like in New York? Do you remember?
The Beauty Queen of Lanane.
Really?
Really, that was the first show that we ever saw. And then the second, we saw that one night. That was the play. And then the second night, on the wall over here that you can't see, we saw Titanic.
Oh, I love Titanic.
Those were the first two shows we saw in New York.
I love that you started with Beauty Queen of Lanane. What an introduction.
Jim, I have to say, Jim thought that if that's what Broadway was about, he did not want to go back. I think it's a fascinating show.
Oh yeah, Martin McDonough is a brilliant person.
That is the first show we saw.
So Kim is asking what your dream show is. So maybe that means like your dream show to produce it, interact, or your dream show to direct, or what do you suppose? What is that show for you?
My dream show to be in, and I guess all of us as we get a certain age want to do. I have two. I want to do Death of a Salesman. I can lose the accent, y'all. I promise I could. I think every actor who loves would want to play Willie Loman at some point in time. And I want to play Peanut in Southern Baptist Sissy so bad. Because, and I think that is because I was Southern Baptist and I lived it. I know that character very well.
You don't want to play Brother Boy in Sordid Lives?
No, I don't know. No, I've never had a desire to do drag. Even when Allison Lawrence made us do it in Divas, I did it. That's just, it's fine. I love to watch drag. I just don't want to participate.
Right.
The other things, I mean, there's several plays I want to direct, and some I'm, getting the chance to do. And I always make sure I don't do shows that I want to direct and the whole season's about me. I mean, everybody knows my love for The Color Purple. I mean, that's
yeah. Why is that? What is it about The Color Purple that resonates with you?
Going back to high school, this is a story that there's very, very few people know. Miss Doris Johnson, my junior year of high school, I think Miss Johnson saw a loneliness in me, maybe a difference, and she would give me books and I would return them because they were hers. But she told me when they said, I want you to come by before you go home, last period, I've got something for you. And I thought it was just another book. And she said, okay. I said, okay. I went by her room and she said, Tim, she says, now don't bring this back to me. This is yours. And she gave me a copy of The Color Purple. She said, I think this story you will relate to it. Even though it's about an African-American woman, I think she saw the human part of me and the quote unquote survival. And we all have stories, and there, I have a story that people don't, you just don't want to talk about certain things in your life. We've all been hurt. And I think at that point in time, and a lot of people, I don't even think my family knows it. I mean, before I had a nervous breakdown, I tried to commit suicide. I mean, that's what brought on a nervous breakdown. But even in high school, because of the bullying and stuff, I really thought about it and didn't want, I just didn't want to be here. And that book changed all that. It let me see people could survive. This was before the movie, before, the Broadway show that came out and then the revival. It's about the story. It's about what that story, what that story is. And what it means to me. It's about resilience and being able to survive in the most heinous situations. And I think it crosses racial boundaries. It crosses sexual identity boundaries. I don't think it's just a story for a woman. I think it can be a story for a man who has survived horrendous things in his life. And I think that's one reason I resonate with that story so much. Everybody thinks it's about Whoopi Goldberg or Cynthia or, Heather Headley. It's so much more than that. And yes, I'm dying to direct that show. So,
well, are you going to?
That is the big announcement. And some people know it. That is the mystery show of the season.
The color purple.
And my biggest fear is that people will not think I should be directing it. But I think there is maybe Alice Walker and a couple of other people who, Alice Walker definitely knows this story better than I do and can relate to the story. But I know these characters and I have a vision for this show, and it's not going to be a copy for that I've seen in New York. It's, I'm going to bring my own spin to the show, and I cannot wait, till all of this is over and we can get back into theaters and we can start this journey. And I'm hoping that people will come back and come see this show and see, what the heart of what this show is. And I think, I like the original Broadway show, but what they did in the revival, concentrating on the story, not costumes, not sets, but the story is so important. And I'm so excited to finally be able to announce that we were released to announce that we're getting that is our final show.
Yeah, and you weren't allowed to say it at the season announcement because it was on tour, and it wasn't until after the tour was over, which was supposed to be June 1st. But because of the COVID pandemic, we were released. The representative actually contacted me this past week and told me that we could, to be visible with the theater. And I contacted Lauren and said, I want to make a big announcement. I didn't know she was going to make it into a personal interview, which I'm very thankful she did. So, I'm really so excited about this show. Great. Me too. I love it. It's a great show, and looks like some other people that are watching are excited. Pam's excited. I think there were some people that guessed it online. Yeah, there's like the worst kept secret in town right now.
I see my good high school friend Antoine said she's so proud. I have been able to keep it together and not cry because I'm very open in my emotions. This is a love letter to, when I do The Color Purple, here's what I want people to know. It's a love letter to my theater children.
Great.
I always said if I could direct The Color Purple, I'd retire. Who knows?
Yeah.
I'm not saying I am, but you never know.
You never know.
We don't know what it's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen.
So, Tim, this has been lovely. I've had a really great time.
I have to.
Can you tell me a little bit about what is hopefully next for the theater? What should be next for the theater?
I hate to say we just don't know, but you know, we definitely had our season plan starting out with Lizzie, and then our cast camp is The Mystery of Edwin Drood, and then
Wow.
the Lauren's.
That's amazing.
And Pete has done it before at Sanderson, and they're excited about bringing it.
That's awesome.
And so we're really excited about bringing American Son. I know Lauren is so excited about American Son coming. And then for our Christmas show this season, we're doing a show that Liz Dressler and Thomas Mooney are putting together for us, like a review cabaret with stories about the different holidays, not just Christmas, but Hanukkah, Kwanzaa. We're going to celebrate all the holidays this year. And then honestly, because of COVID, I'm playing around with the last part of the season right now. I know that The Color Purple will be ending the season, but because of Calendar Girls and other things moving around, we had a cast for Calendar Girls, and I really want us to put on that show. And I'm still out talking with the licensing agent. What the general theater audience don't realize is we still have to jump through hoops about changing dates. Even though this is a pandemic, we have to get those dates changed. We can't just change them on our own. So it's, you know, it's in flux, and the biggest thing I want is to know when we can get back in the door,
Right.
so we can make these plans.
How can David Kleonsky just message that he's very happy that you get to do The Color Purple finally. How can the theater community at large and you know, patrons, how can they help you and support you right now?
You know, I've been saying all this time, if you know, give to all the theaters if you can. You know, I don't want to seem like we're the only theater out there that is going through trouble. We all are. But you know, they can go on to our website, www.nract.org, and go to the donate button. And you know, if it's $1, $5, every dollar is adding up and helping us keep the wheels turning. And you know, we want to come back and do great theater, and cannot wait to get back in the doors and say welcome back home to everybody.
Yeah, I agree. Well, thanks, Tim.
Thank you, Jesse. Thank you for being so kind. This is, you know, I have to say I felt really safe with you, and I appreciate that.
Excellent.
I don't need you to love me. I don't need you to love. Think that I need to live a bountiful life with all the love in me. I'll stand as tall as the tallest tree, and I'm grateful for every day that I'm given, both the easy and the hard ones I'm living. But most of all, I'm grateful for loving who I really am. I'm beautiful, yes,